A lot of my mates couldn't get jobs. Obviously, that was the financial crisis, right? And I was like halfway through this week by that point, and I'd already lost like $5 million.
He's exaggerated a lot in his book. His mother paid for him to go to university. She had a really good job. So he was not poverty-stricken. He has no concept whatsoever of running a business or growth generation.
Now, I'm really sorry to do this, because trust me, I find this guy more annoying than like Owen Jones and Femi Olawale combined. But Gary Stevenson, the multi-millionaire former trader turned hard left tax the rich economist, who is now a favourite across the MSM, being given a huge amount of airtime, especially by the British bashing corporation, matters. This guy has been accused of telling outlandish lies about his past by his former colleagues. But there is now a growing argument that this man is also a figure the right in the UK should be very worried about.
What would your advice be to them, Gary, at this moment in time?
This is such a hard question. I know Dan's angry at me for what I put in my video, How to Get Rich. Somebody came around to my house and asked me this the other day. Obviously, I get asked it a lot because, stupidly, I'm very public about the fact that I'm rich. What I did is not replicable. It's not. I'm sorry, but it's not. People always say, why don't you teach me to trade? Like, it's hard. It's hard trading and it's dangerous. And I think a lot of young men are getting sort of sold into trading and becoming gambling addicts. You know, work hard.
Honestly, my blood pressure rises every time I see this man. Why am I talking about him? Well, look at this tweet from Charlie Downs, who posted, "The right needs a good answer to the emerging post-woke left, embodied in the figure of Gary Stevenson." Though obviously astroturfed, his message is cutting through. And understandably so. Housing is unaffordable. Energy is expensive. Wages are down. Work is soulless. And the sense of decline is all-pervading. Young people are asking why, and Stevenson is providing a compelling answer in a relatable and straightforward way. Moreover, the substance of his answer, the rich, the billionaires, the capitalists, wealth inequality, cannot just be dismissed. For too long, the right has unquestionably embraced capitalism and the free market as the fix-all solution to our nation's problems. This attitude is 50 years out of date. Stevenson is right. Moneyed interests are partly to blame for the condition of Britain, and more capitalism is the last thing we need. Of course, what he fails to address is the fact that policies like mass immigration are the project of those same moneyed interests. Rather than pointing this out and offering real solutions, he advocates for yet more tax, which is exactly what the present political class wants too. Stevenson is pushing at an open door. He is not a radical, but an agent of the establishment. He promises change, but what he actually represents is more of the same. Restoration is the domain of the right. Time for us to stop being timid conservatives. We've got a country to save. And I'm delighted to say Charlie Downs joins me now alongside the successful businesswoman Bernie Spofforth, who I imagine takes a bit of a different view. But Charlie, can you just tell me why you think this message from Gary Stevenson is resonating so much with people of your age?
Oh, I've been itching to talk about this, Dan, so I'm glad that you've given me the opportunity. The right has basically thought in only economic terms for the last 50 years, since Thatcher, basically. We've behaved as if the only thing that matters when it comes to politics and the running of a nation is the economy. And you can see this right the way from Thatcher through to John Major, through even to Blair, the continuation of Thatcher, through then to Cameron and the Cameronite Conservative Party, right the way through to Sunak, and today with Keir Starmer. Because all you ever hear our politicians talk about is growth, whatever that means. I mean, growth as defined by our ruling class is just an increase in GDP, which is this totally abstract figure that doesn't really have any, it doesn't reflect the well-being and the quality of life of ordinary people at all. GDP per capita is the statistic that would tell you that. And GDP per capita has not kept pace with GDP, certainly since 2008. And the price of housing, the price of electricity, wages and so on have all, basically have deteriorated, and they've left the welfare of ordinary people declining. And this is what Stevenson talks about, right? And he provides answers, though we might disagree with them, he provides answers to those questions. And I think that there's a reason that he is, as I said, he is AstroTurf. There's no doubt about it. He's been on Question Time and all that sort of thing. Which other, populist white male YouTuber could get on Question Time in a matter of months? I mean, it looks to me as it certainly raises my eyebrows. But he is providing quite a compelling answer to these questions. He's saying, well, the reason that your quality of life is deteriorating is because greedy, moneyed interests at the very top of society are doing things that are making life more difficult for you whilst lining their own pockets. And to be frank, I think that he's not wrong about that. And maybe I will be, shot down as some kind of socialist for making that comment. But I think that if you look at the economic system that we have in the West, where huge amounts of capital are owned by a small number of people, and moreover, not owned, but managed by organizations like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, I think that it's quite fair to say that these moneyed interests absolutely have hugely disproportionate level of power over our society. Because like I said in my tweet, policies like mass immigration are the project of these moneyed interests. It's in the interest of the capitalist class to have an ever-expanding workforce, because that suppresses wages, and it allows, especially when you're having mass migration from the third world, from impoverished regions where work and stability is not available, therefore bringing in people who are going to be prepared to take lower wages. That's obviously in the interests of those seeking to turn a profit, because it means they have to spend less on their workforce. And what that means for those people and for the working class in Britain is that quality of life degrades. But the point is, and what I would say my answer to Gary Stevenson is that Britain, or any nation for that matter, is not just a balance sheet. And this is the problem, because we've thought of Britain as being just an economic zone, at least for the last 50 years. And it isn't. It's a ancient ancestral homeland with a beautiful, unique history, a beautiful countryside, beautiful people, beautiful culture. It's a country that's full of beauty, and it's being destroyed by the present political class that we have. And so I would rather have a conversation about how the economy is a means to an end, right? Economics are not the be all and end all, but actually the economy should serve the national interest, rather than the other way around, where the nation serves economic interests. And I think that the way you do that is not through socialism or the kind of wealth taxes that people like Gary Stevenson advocate for, but by reconceptualizing how we think of our nation and how we think of the relationship between the economy and ordinary people. Because actually, what is important when it comes to building a nation? Well, I would say that it's giving people a sense of belonging, giving people a sense of purpose, a sense of rootedness, a sense that they are in their right place, doing the right thing, and contributing to society. And I think for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, we had that in this country, because we had an economy and a kind of a nation that was organized along the lines of rootedness rather than the kind of nomadism that we have today. Because I think part of the reason that young people especially have such problems with mental health and such problems with feeling a sense of belonging and purpose is because we're always on the move, whether that's moving from rented accommodation to rented accommodation, overpriced and full of mold in a place that we don't feel we belong, where we didn't grow up, or whether it's work that feels soulless and completely without meaning, just punching a clock, hitting KPIs for a manager who you hate. It's no wonder that young people especially are feeling so disaffected in this country. But I think the way we answer that is not by giving more money to the government, especially this government, which again is Stevenson's solution. It's by saying, look, the point of an economy is not to drive as much profit as possible for a tiny number of people. That is wrong. And that, in my mind, is what pure capitalism is. And I think the right have been wrong to ally themselves with pure capitalism. But at the same time, we can't have centralized control of the economy, because that way there's no innovation. There's no wealth generation. And so you need a mixture of the two. And this is where I start to sound like Blair or something. You need a kind of third economic way that combines the best elements of both of those things, because you need to ensure that ordinary people have enough to put food on their table and clothes on their children's back, and to own a home, not just rent a home, but to own a home and to create a sense of rootedness. But you also need to ensure that the economic activities of large economic actors like corporations are in the interest of ordinary people, because if those large corporations are advocating for and funding policies like mass immigration, which destroy the way of life of those same ordinary people that I was talking about just now, well, then we can't have that, right? What I would like to see is a relationship between the state and the economy, where the state has its hand on the economy's shoulder and is making sure that economic activity always serves the national interest. And to be honest with you, and I might get in trouble for saying this, but if you look at China's economic model, this is essentially what they do. Now, I'm not saying that we should turn into a totalitarian surveillance state by any means, but what I am saying is, whether you like it or not, China's government does make sure that all the economic activity that takes place in their country serves the national interest. And maybe that's because they aren't a democracy. Maybe that's because they can think on a wider timescale than we can. But I would say that, maybe there's a thing or two we could learn from that, because right now, the economic system that we have in Britain and the West more generally is not serving the interests of ordinary people. And as a matter of fact, Stevenson is right when he says it's lining the pockets of an out-of-touch oligarchical billionaire class.
Bernie, one of the problems is that I think Gary Stevenson is such a bad actor whose own story has not been scrutinized at all. So before I get you to come in, let me give you an example. But first, I never recommend anything unless I truly believe in it. And today I've got something absolutely game-changing for you. Have you ever stopped to think about how crucial comfort is, especially down there? Well, let me tell you, today's Outspoken is proudly sponsored by Sheath Underwear, the revolutionary brand shaking up men's comfort across the globe. And here's what makes Sheath even better. It was founded by a brilliant US Army veteran, Robert Patton, while he was serving in Iraq back in 2007. That's right, this isn't just any underwear brand. It was designed for the toughest conditions imaginable. Patton was battling relentless heat and discomfort in full combat gear, and he thought there has to be a better way, so he created it. And let's be honest, traditional underwear just doesn't cut it anymore. Sheath's innovative dual pouch design ensures your comfort all day long, keeping things separate, cool, and fresh. Imagine your essentials being comfortably cradled away from unwanted friction and heat. Trust me, it's genuinely transformative. I've tested these things at the gym, on long days at work, relaxing at home. Once you've experienced Sheath, there's simply no going back. My new order arrived today. They're stylish, they're supportive, they deliver unmatched comfort. To be honest, I view it like upgrading from economy to first class, but for your underwear. And right now I'm offering you an exclusive 20% discount at sheath.com. Yes, that's 20% off your entire order. All you have to do is use my special promo code Outspoken at checkout. So what are you waiting for? Sheath is the perfect present, by the way, if you're looking for your husband, your boyfriend, your son, your brother, or your hard-to-buy best mate. And guess what, ladies? When you're on the website, you will see there are female versions available too. By the way, Sheath, very cool brand, the first official underwear of the UFC. And look, there's some of the ladies in the brand. So click on the link below or just go to sheath.com and enter Outspoken at checkout. You can thank me later when you're feeling comfortable, confident, and ready to tackle anything your day throws at you. Sheath Underwear, redefining comfort one pair at a time. But now, back to the show.
What was the most amount of money that you lost?
Well, I lost $8 million in a week when I was in 2010, when I was still 23. I lost $8 million in a week. And that was mad, because I graduated in 2008. So a lot of my mates couldn't get jobs. Obviously, that was the financial crisis, right? And I was like halfway through this week by that point, and I'd already lost like $5 million in 3 days. And all my mates around just like playing Pro Evolution. And you're just thinking like, I've lost $5 million. Like, how much more can I lose before I lose my job? It really dehumanizes you.
And Kent Braeburn, who worked on the trading desk at Citibank alongside Stevenson, said, like, he actually contacted the guy, Stevenson, and said, is this book fiction or non-fiction? Because there are so many outlandish lies. Do you buy what he's saying at all? And also, how do you respond to Charlie?
First, I want to respond to Charlie because I quite like a lot of what you said, Charlie, but I think you're missing the key thing here. And that's that Gary Stevenson is naming rich people as the problem. He hasn't talked about corporations. He's talked about rich people. And this is a massive distraction. Don't forget, Gary Stevenson is now aligned with Democrat funders. These are the same funders that fund huge NGOs pushing this progressive liberalism everywhere. Now, over the course of the last 5 years, a huge amount of the public all over the world have begun to wake up to, hold on a minute, all of my taxes are being spent on complete bullshit, right? We've got net zero on this fictitious climate change thing where, you know, cities are going to be underwater by 2020. We're now in 2025 and nothing is underwater. So there's this huge problem that these big NGOs and these big platforms and these huge corporations, I'm with you there totally, they've got a huge problem, right? Because they're not making it work anymore for the British public. So now, what's the argument? What can we do now? Well, you're all still victims because now the problem is the rich people. And you just took the public that are watching down straight down that road. You just took them there, which is exactly what Labour wanted you to do, which is so brilliant of these people. I mean, seriously, these guys are so good at strategy because now nobody's looking at net zero. Nobody's looking at, you know, all the other things we're spending complete crap on, like teaching people how to cook in Africa with electricity when they don't even have running water. We've stopped people focusing on that. And now the bad guy is the rich people. And my problem with Gary Stevenson, yeah, you're right. Look, he's exaggerated a lot in his book, Dan, and I'm sure lots of people do. But he talks about coming from poverty. Let's talk about that. He grew up in a 2-parent family, in a terraced house with brothers and sisters. His mother paid for him to go to university. She had a really good job. And in 2011, he had him, or whatever year it was, he had himself a Sega Mega Drive and a Sonic the Hedgehog game. Well, the Sega Mega Drive cost 200 quid and the Sonic the Hedgehog cost 39.99. I have one, never got past level 3. Anyway, my whole point to that is that child benefit that year was £7.35 a week. So he was not poverty stricken. Now, Gary goes on about entrepreneurs. He forgets that the people he's talking about all around him were entrepreneurs. He has never been one. He's an employee. He got taken into a very large corporate operation as an employee. He's never got up at 6 o'clock in the morning to take in the deliveries. He doesn't know how to write an invoice. He doesn't know what a debit is. He doesn't know how to speak to customer service or HR. It was all provided for him. 99% of businesses in this country are micro businesses. They employ 1 to 10 people. And those owners, I guarantee it, I've done it myself. They have paid their staff and not taken a salary. He has never done that. He has no concept whatsoever of running a business or growth generation. Because if he did, he wouldn't be having 1 million subscribers on YouTube and pulling in £500,000 a year from those people. He'd be down in Knowsley where they filmed that program, and he'd be talking to those kids because their parents in Knowsley didn't even get A-levels. Right, they didn't get A-levels. Up until 5 years ago, you couldn't take an A-level in Knowsley, says Gary, who went to Oxford. Yeah. So he has absolutely no concept whatsoever. He's been scooped up by these huge progressive liberal organizations, NGOs that I fund and you fund, Charlie, and he's been taken up into this narrative of complete loveliness. Look how lovely it will all be if the economy works for everybody. Meanwhile, his friends in that group are taking subsidies because without subsidies, those businesses would fail. And by subsidies, I don't mean that the government has paid it. I mean taxpayers have paid it.
Yeah.
The reason all our prices are higher is because of energy. You're right, Charlie. We are deindustrialized. Our house prices are too high. Our energy is the highest in the industrial world. But guess what? It's for the greater good. And it's the rich man's fault.
And some of his
And
rhetoric...
that's why the left are so brilliant at this.
Well, yes.
And go back to Ben Habib, Dan.
Yes.
That's what Ben is trying to do with his PAC, is galvanize the right to have the ideas, Charlie, that you're suggesting. The problem is that the current liberal progressives and all of their organizations have 70 years on him.
And some of
70
his
years.
rhetoric, by the way, is actually dangerous, I think.
Yeah.
Look at this.
Very hard to keep wealth in generations.
Down in the 20th century, we had 2 world wars and a Holocaust. that redistributed wealth, I would prefer not to have that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Charlie, come on. Dangerous talk.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that podcast. I've seen that clip going around, and I am prepared to give Gary Stevenson the benefit of the doubt because that's been taken out of context. I don't know the context of the conversation. But I think what I'm getting at here is I'm just observing the reality of the fact that, I can tell you anecdotally in my own life that there are young people who are really buying into Gary Stevenson's message, rightly or wrongly. He is effective. And I think part of that is there's a kind of, and I knew this was going to happen, right? Because I referred to him as being the embodiment of the post-woke left, because woke is in the rearview mirror now. Woke is over. All of the major corporations that were propping it up have moved away from it. USAID, which was funding it and astroturfing it, is obviously over because of Elon Musk's Doge program. And, the left are basically having to redefine themselves. And I knew, I've really sincerely believed this for years, that they would go back to a kind of, post-2008 Occupy Wall Street, punky, anti-capitalist kind of vibe. And actually, where woke was cringe and browbeating and moralizing and horrible and just awful and embarrassing to be associated with, especially for young men, especially for young white straight men, something like Gary Stevenson is a far easier sell to those people. Gary Stevenson, there's something that's kind of cool about him. And I know that you said you find him annoying, Dan, but to be honest with you, I don't. I think that his delivery is quite compelling, and I think his style is quite effective. He does he never wears a suit. He comes across as being this kind of rebellious, kind of punky type figure, ignoring the fact that he, as I said, is an agent of the establishment, entirely astroturfed, bought and paid for by those same minded interests that he claims to rail against.
And do you know what, though? I bet his former colleagues are like, if only you'd met this guy when he was in the city and he was wearing his pinstripe suit every day. But it is a fascinating debate. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.